Hi, I'm back, and this time I've stolen something. Well, not exactly, actually. I'm just going to be talking about stolen goods, and by this I don't mean plagiarizing. No, I'm not actually going to dare to be teaching you about plagiarism. Actually, by stolen goods, I mean learning from the work of master poets. And I think that if any of you have read some of the works of master poets like Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman, you probably will have learned something about their style. And so what I'm going to be talking about in this segment is seeing how we can take what we've learned from reading their works and then writing poems in their style to create maybe some poems that hopefully we actually like. So stolen goods is actually what I call this, although I'm hopefully not stealing from anybody. Just mimicking my style. Writing poems inspired by master poets. If you want to learn a new style of poetry, look to the masters for help. Mimicking a master poet can be really helpful. It gives you the freedom to use words and rhythms that you might not have thought of on your own. Exploration leads to improvement, as I think we very well know. And we want to write to learn. So what I mean by write to learn is writing in order to build upon experience in order to get better at a skill. Experimenting with different styles allows you to sharpen your writing skills. So step number 1, find a poem you like. That shouldn't be too hard. I'm thinking maybe you can find some of them in Dancing Fingers. Okay, well, I'm not going to be offended if you want to use something else that's not Dancing Fingers. You can find thousands of different poems that I'm sure would be very good by Emily Dickinson, by Walt Whitman, by Wordsworth. You can really find tons of good poems out there. 2, ask questions about the poem's setting. Where is the poem set? So, for instance, I have my poem Lunch in here. It's kind of a humorous one. It's set at a gross restaurant. So, if the setting is maybe more humorous, like a gross restaurant, or if it's more serious, like an empty and desolate wild moor. 3, ask questions about the poem's subject matter. So, if it's something more light, like a disgusting lunch, or something more heavy, like the consequences of war on mankind. Ask questions about what the poet chooses to write about. If it's something heavy and deep, then you can try to think of something heavy and deep for subject matter for your poem. If it's something light and maybe relaxing or humorous, think of something light and relaxing or humorous. And then here are some questions, some basic questions to ask about the poem. Does the poem rhyme? Is this poem told from the first person point of view, so using I's, we's? Does the poem include descriptive words? Does the poem include action words? Is the poem about a person? Is the poem about a place? So you might be wondering why I ask these questions. Well, they're all really useful in identifying a poet's style. And so, for instance, does the poem rhyme? Like, as you will probably notice, I think actually all, or the majority of, at any rate, poems in Dancing Fingers I've written do rhyme. And I really like using rhyming because I think that it's more of a challenge for me to try to work within that structure, and it really allows me to express myself in a way that I feel comfortable. So I really like rhyming. Now, my sister, on the other hand, when you're reading her poetry, it does not rhyme in general. I haven't known my sister really write a rhyming poem. So you can look at things like this for a poet's style. Is this poem told from the first person point of view? Occasionally I will write poems from the first person point of view. Sometimes they'll be more objective. And I think with most of my poems, well, actually it does depend. If I'm writing a narrative poem, it will be from I. If I'm writing a poem that's maybe on a bigger, heavier topic, it will probably be objective. So you can really analyze things like this to get a better feel of the poem. Does the poem include descriptive language? Now, my poem Lunch, you're going to find lots of descriptive language describing the gross food. Does the poem include action words? Some of my poems will be very filled with action, lots of swirling and twirling and jumping and whooping. Now, is the poem about a person? A lot of my poems will have people or a person as a main character, kind of as a poem about a place. And if it's not about a person, then my poems would probably be out of place. So these are just some of the things you can look at when you're analyzing poetry, some notes and dancing figures, and whether they're more abstract, whether it's hard to tell what the poem is about exactly. These are some questions you want to ask yourself when you are reading poetry in order to get a better feel for the poet and the poem. 4. Now write a poem that has a similar topic, point of view, and sound to the poem you chose. So if you chose a really, really humorous poem that's very light, that rhymes, and has also a first-person point of view, then you could maybe choose a subject matter that is light and humorous. You could rhyme it, and you could use maybe action words. So that one used action words. So think about some details like this as you are writing your poem. Now I'd like to talk about types of poetry, because when you are doing stolen goods or copying the master poets, and really when you're writing any types of poetry, then some techniques and definitions really do help as far as your understanding goes. Poetry. So, there are many types of poems, but today we'll focus on haikus, sonnets, free verse, and limericks. Before you decide, you should know about your choices. Haikus are a form of Japanese poetry with 17 syllables in 3 unrhymed lines of 5, 7, and 5 syllables, often about nature or a season. So we were talking about leaves, stars, and stones, and haikus are a really cool way to talk about some of the things you've gotten from nature. And Basho was a really famous Japanese haiku writer, and I would actually advise you to read some of those Japanese haikus because you really get a feel of how these poets are looking at nature and how they express that through their poetry. And another thing is that I actually have one of my favorite haikus. It's about a frog, and it shows you how a small thing that you observe in nature can become a really big poem. This is a haiku of my own. A lone chirp, the bird, left behind in its own nest, welcoming the dawn. And I personally do not write haikus very often, so I hope that this was a good attempt. Sonnets are 14-line rhyming poems with very set structure. William Shakespeare, the noted British poet, was very famous for sonnets, but I think he was actually more famous for his plays, such as Romeo and Juliet. You may have heard of Shakespeare. In fact, I'm hoping you have. A free verse poem does not have a fixed poetic meter and is usually unrhymed lines of different lengths. So a free verse poem, you can do pretty much whatever you want. And the American poet Walt Whitman is really famous actually for writing free verse. So I kind of come up with my own styles of poetry, and that's one of the really cool things about poetry is that you really have a lot of choice in what you do. So my typical style would be an A-B rhyme scheme, stanzas of 4 lines, with 3 to 4 stanzas. Now, that is just something I like writing, but if you prefer couplets with an A-B rhyme scheme with 8 couplets and 1 line following, then that would be cool too. So, or if you want a poem that is totally unrhymed, anything really goes in. Free verse allows you to do whatever you want. Limericks are 5-line poems that are usually humorous. The rhyme scheme is usually A, B, B, A. Actually, that's one of the characterizing things of a limerick. And so limericks are there's actually a very famous person who writes limericks, and that is William Lear. And I would also advise you to read some limericks. If you are feeling down, you want something humorous, then limericks are a good pick-me-up. So here is actually a limerick of my own. I thought that you would like the pie, for at least I had the will to try. But yes, the burnt crust is too hard, and the filling is just lard. Oh well, at least you didn't die. So, as you can see, pie, try, hard, lard, and die. Here's some vocabulary for poetry. Meter, if you've been wondering what I've been talking about, what is meter exactly, is an arranged pattern of rhythm in a line of verse. So meter really is what's controlling the way a poem sounds. And the way something sounds is really important in poetry, because when you're making a story, well, you do want it to sound good, but that's not the primary thing. It's mostly about the storyline and the plot. Now, when you're writing a poem, sound is really one of the most important things. How it reads, how it sounds when it's read aloud is very important in a poem. Stanza is a number of lines of verse forming a separate unit within a poem. So, for instance, What I like to do is 4 lines of verse. So I have 1,